What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today, we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and continue our coverage over some Spider-Man comics, except this time, we're going to pick up with a Spider-Man villain. We're going to pick up with Morbius because he does have a movie coming out this month. And so I decided it'd be a good idea to go ahead and do one of his recent stories that actually came out about 2 years ago now, since the new year. And it's really an interesting story written by a new writer in Marvel Comics. And I kind of like it. So if you like today's comic book video, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read? Well, let me know in the comments below. You never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoy today's video. With the book opening, we pick up with the second melter. The melter is what his name means, being able to use a gun to melt things, really. And like I said, he is the second melter. If I remember correctly, he first appeared in Superior Spider-Man number 26. And he really just found the gear and decided to be the new melter, where we see him working on some kind of formula that he is going to test on some random people bound to a chair. Except while he is testing on these random people, someone or something spooks the guards and makes them run all over the place and freak out. Melter is confused on why he is paying these guys if they get scared of something so easily, except someone is actually taking out the Melter's men. So that means something really powerful is in the warehouse. Of course, this person is Morbius. And at this point, even though Morbius is still trying to find some kind of cure for his mutation, he is also trying to protect this part of Brooklyn, which I think is called Greenpoint. The reason why he is attacking Melter is because Melter has been going around stealing resources from an area that is already struggling. So you have Melter kind of being the hero of the area and making Melter pay for his mistake for coming into this part of town. Also, he takes back whatever Melter has been working on for himself and leaves the warehouse after destroying most of the place to make it hard for Melter to continue his work. Remember what I said, that Morbius is a hero for this area, but at the same time, he is still trying to cure the fact that he is a living vampire. So after stealing the formula what Melter was working on and kind of giving a closer look, he thought that maybe this could be the cure he has been looking for this whole time. So it means that he is going to inject this new formula into him. He does some work to it, but he still injects it into him. At the same time, he is still thinking about his old best friend named Emil. Emil, of course, was killed after Morbius became what he is now, which is the living vampire. So he is trying to get rid of this vampire half as a way to pay back for what happened to his friend Emil. The thing is that the formula actually works and he begins to change back to normal. This leads us back to Melter, letting us know that Melter is not just going to be a throwaway character in this book, which is something to mention because he is going to be somewhat important for the later half of this video, except while he is trying to figure out who in the world just attacked him and why in the world his men couldn't stop that person, you have somebody appear and begin to talk about how they know a lot about Morbius, making it seem that this person is close to him and that this person is going to go after Morbius to get revenge for whatever he has done to this person. That is when we find out it is a lady who is geared up to hunt him down. Now, switching back to Morbius, we see that he was celebrating the fact the formula worked and he was turning back to normal, except that is when we see the formula actually was not good for him and begin to change him even more into a vampire. Well, a vampire looking kind of like a monster, and this is going to be the main point of the book, how the formula had basically made things worse for him now. This gives us the moment we also learn that the new formula is doing more than just changing the appearance of Morbius, that the hunger he had as a vampire is growing and making things worse for him. What I mean is that the fact he is having a hard time controlling the hunger, so even if he goes through some of the blood packs he has in his safe, it is not going to slow the hunger long enough for him to have control over himself. That sooner or later, he is going to lose complete control of the monster side of him, and this could be a very dangerous thing for the city, of course. You have Morbius get control long enough to look at his blood sample over with the last formula he just used. Instead of seeing the vampire part in his DNA going away like he thought it was going to, he sees the vampire in his DNA begin to rapidly change his DNA, which makes sense because it did change his appearance and also making him hunger more for blood. So of course, this is very huge. Except before he is able to look closer at the blood sample, that is when he is attacked by the lady we saw earlier. We also come to find out that she has teamed up with Melter. So now the two of them are working together to kill Morbius. Except something to point out is that the lady here, who we still don't know her name yet, is here for revenge, but more in a way like Morbius affected her life in the worst way. Melter is here to get revenge just because Morbius trashed his lab and stole his formula. Except you have Morbius tell us that he actually knows this lady. That the lady name is Elizabeth. She is the sister of Emil. Emil was the best friend of Morbius who had died after Morbius became the living vampire. Emil was trying to help his friend Morbius find a cure to his vampire side. Something to point out is that Morbius is not your typical vampire, that he was turned into a vampire thanks to science. Either way, Elizabeth is here to get revenge for her brother Emil, since he was killed thanks to Emil hanging out with Morbius. Morbius is able to escape because Elizabeth tried to use a grenade, hoping it would actually kill Morbius. So Morbius goes to some kind of lab, but he comes here to this lab actually hoping to find something that could help him fix this problem. Also that he tells us more about his past with Emil and Elizabeth, that of course they grew up together and that he wasn't just close to Emil, he had a tight bond with Elizabeth as well. So it's like the three of them had some kind of trio bond, which makes sense. This is where things get to become more interesting. While Morbius is in this lab trying to study his blood more, well, you have one of the guards that Morbius took out earlier to get into this lab press an alarm, which of course is going to alert police to come here. So you have Morbius come back to them, and since his vampire side is beginning to take over more, he is actually about to kill these guards, which is something he really does not want to do. Except before he is able to kill these guards, that is when you have Spider-Man appear and actually stop him from killing the guards. Switching back to Melter and Elizabeth, well, you have the two of them kind of decide to go their separate ways. Well, really it is more of Melter thinking about going his own way. The reason why is because Elizabeth tells Melter that Morbius is not your usual vampire, that in reality he became a vampire thanks to science. That makes Melter actually think about taking the formula he has and actually use the formula for his own reasons, since now the formula has a mixture to what Melter made in Morbius blood in there too. So his goal is to replicate the formula and use it for his own purpose. This is going to pop up again later on in this book. Getting back to Spider-Man fighting against Morbius, this makes sense for both the fight and Spider-Man being here too, since Morbius first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 100, which we did cover on this channel as well. These two go way back, and Spider-Man has always been kind of defending Morbius for what he has become, which is technically known as the living vampire. But of course, with Morbius being mutated and now it is becoming hard for him to control the vampire side of him, he actually begins to fight against Spider-Man. This fight does go on for a while, but it does end up with Spider-Man actually getting bitten by Morbius. Except the problem is that The bite doesn't affect Spider-Man, which is something that has been pointed out so many times, that the bite of Spider-Man doesn't really do much to Spider-Man, mainly because Spider-Man blood is radiated thanks to his spider bite that gave him his spider powers, except thanks to Spider-Man's blood, well, it actually helps slow down the hunger of Morbius, and he is able to control the wild side of him being a vampire. So to Morbius, there must be some kind of cure to this latest mutation of Morbius, and the key is Spider-Man's blood. So you have Spider-Man agreeing to help Morbius out to fix this problem. Now the two of them catch up and work on a cure to help Morbius out. Now something to point out is that Spider-Man had multiple times when he had mutated, but when he first came into contact with Morbius, Spider-Man was going through the 6-armed spider mutation, so Spider-Man knows what Morbius is going through, except after hours of working together, well, they only made a small breakthrough, and if they used what they made, it won't cure Morbius. It will actually bring him back to his previous form, which is something that Morbius does not want. He wants to be cured, so he is upset that Spider-Man wants to take a break. Except while they are working on the project, you have Elizabeth show up and of course throws a grenade to throw everything off. Spider-Man also gets knocked out, and that leaves Morbius to defend himself against Elizabeth, which of course is here to get revenge for her dead brother thanks to Morbius. Now there is another piece of information we did not learn earlier, but we are learning it right now. Elizabeth actually had a crush on Morbius when her, Emil, and Morbius were all young, except for Morbius, he did not like her like that. He only liked her as a friend, so he turned her down, which sucks, but it makes you wonder if this could be another reason on why she wants to kill Morbius. For me, I don't think so. I think it's just another piece of information that had to be shared for us to learn more about the character. Now, after the funeral for her brother Emil and learn how Emil was killed, it leads to her actually going out in the world and being trained on how to kill vampires. We don't get told what group this is and some of the characters who are part of this group, just that this group was the one who trained her, and it led to her actually being ready to kill Morbius. So it explains how she went from friend of Morbius to vampire hunter. With Morbius' vampire side beginning to come out more, well, it makes him attack Elizabeth. Spider-Man tells Elizabeth that the reason why Morbius is crazier than usual is because Morbius tried to use the new formula. Also that Morbius' crazy side made him attack Elizabeth. But then there's a moment where you have Morbius beg Elizabeth to kill him. Now for Elizabeth, it is hard for her to do this even though she trained herself for this moment right here. She does shoot him and thinks the job is done, but unfortunately it doesn't work. You have Morbius get right back up and ready to continue the fight. Before we can see the fight continue, we have to jump back over to Melter, because remember what I said earlier. Melter found out that Morbius was able to take his formula and make improvements on it. Melter saw what had happened to Morbius, so he thought it would be a good idea to reproduce the formula and see what he can do with it. Also, we find out that Melter has cancer and only has a short time to live. Either way, we see Melter reproduce the formula Morbius had made and inject him and some of his men to see a change in them, and of course it does change them. Getting back to Morbius, Spider-Man, and Elizabeth, this is the moment where you have a few things happen, starting with the idea that Morbius is actually trying to control the monster side in him, but also that when Morbius tries to bite Spider-Man again, well, Elizabeth is confused on why Spider-Man is not trying to fight back, where you have Spider-Man mention that Morbius needs to drink Spider-Man's blood because it helps Morbius control his monster side. You then have Morbius again mention that the formula he got from Melter is the reason why he is in this new form. This is the moment you have Elizabeth mention that Melter has a new formula and use the new formula for his own needs, which makes the three of them decide to work together to stop the Melter. And we're going to skip some parts of this book where you have the three of them go back to Melter base, and we see that Melter used the formula not just on his men but also on himself as well. So we have humans who have been transformed into different kinds of animal monsters. Luckily, before the big three came here, they were able to create a formula to turn everyone back to normal, and that even means Melter as well. After all the fighting is done, you have Elizabeth leave and you have Morbius go back to his lab, hoping to find a cure for his mutation. The book closes on Morbius going back to his lab and being greeted by Elizabeth, who sees that Morbius is more than just a monster, that he is trying to reverse what had happened to him, that he is not doing this to be selfish, that he is doing it to repay for all of his debt. So this kind of makes Elizabeth decide that she can leave Morbius alone for now, and that's the end of this character, leaving us wondering if she is going to come back later on or not. But this is the end of today's video, so please hit the like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I do hope you enjoy today's video.